Hey, Scott from MyGrowthRings.com here.
And Seth from Aristocob.com.
Why not? Together along with you, the three of us, we're Marco Ben's Breakfast Club. Welcome back once again to Tobacco Advent 2021, day 16. And on today's date in history, we're smoking what, boy?
Today we're smoking butter rum, and as we mentioned yesterday, we're on to the duplicates. So we're just going to go through all of the tobaccos that were sent in by people that sent multiple tobaccos. And so this is again from Brian. So thank you.
All right. And our question of the day. What are bad recommendations that you hear in your profession or area of expertise? Bad recommendations that you hear. I've got so many areas of expertise. How do I narrow that down?
So I'll start with two big ones. We sell grease interceptors, grease separators for restaurants, and there is a lot of grease separators have been around for over 100 years. In that time, there have been a lot of rules of thumb that have been adopted and have been accepted as gospel without any questioning if they're actually valid. And so many times, I find myself in conversations with people or reading comments from people that are well educated in the space, that adhere to the rules of thumb in the face of contrary evidence. One of the rules of thumb is that it takes at least 30 minutes of holding time inside of a water tank for grease to rise to the top of a grease interceptor. The testing and certification that we do, and we have products that are 99% effective, efficient at removing the grease, so they remove 99% or more. It takes place over a 2-minute drain period, right? And so I've had literal conversations where I'm talking to somebody about this, and they say, well, that's not possible because it's not 30 minutes. Well, 30 minutes, if you go historically, was just an arbitrary number that somebody pulled out of the air because the idea sounds good, right? The idea is the longer you're holding on to it, the longer it can settle. And a large part of that is because these grease separators, the very first ones that were used commercially, were septic tanks. Septic tanks, as people started connecting to city sewers, they said, well, use these for capturing grease then. Right, so in a septic tank, it's a different environment, and there are some things about settling time and how long do you want to hold on to everything. That is important there for grease interceptor. It's not the same. So we run into that sort of stuff happens all the time in our industry.
Just to get your head around this, they have a lab in their facility that's basically, imagine a platform or a deck that is a story or two up, and up there they melt lard. They have freezers or refrigerators full of boxes of lard, and they melt it all down and have it in these basically sinks. And then down below, they got plumbing that runs down through the grease separators. And when they're ready to go, they flip a valve, and this stuff starts flowing. Water and this now totally liquefied fat that's mixed in with the water, and it passes through their separator or through their competitor's separator if they're testing to see, how efficient are those products.
That's right.
Very fascinating process, and that thought of, okay, the fat's in the water and the water's moving, it's flowing through a drain pipe. How do you separate it? It's really interesting. So yeah, they're applying kind of old thinking and old expectations. That's an interesting thought.
So that's one. The other for the area of expertise is the advice, and the standard expectation is doing questions and answers at the end of a presentation.
Oh gosh.
And there are lots of things I could talk about, bad recommendations for presentations, but that one is one that I have learned is just terrible. Yeah. And this was, what's his name? Tim Reiseter. Points this out real strongly. He said, in your presentation, first of all, the last 5 minutes is where 100% of what you say in the last 5 minutes is most likely to be retained. The rest is much lower than that. 70% of the first 5 minutes, 100% of the last 5, and about 20 to 25% of everything in between, right? And so where should you put the thing that you most want them to walk away with remembering it? If they went out of the conference room and explained to their coworker what your presentation was about, the thing they will tell them is what happens in the last 5 minutes. And what do most presentations do in the last 5 minutes? They do Q&A where the questions are never the best thing that you want them to remember, and the answers are at best satisfactory to the one problem for the one person in the audience, and at worst, you don't know the answer, or the answer is just absolutely way off base from what your presentation was. So for me, if I do Q&A at all, my preference is to not do it because, again,
Do it as you go.
right. If for me, I will do it right before. I'll make a point to draw their attention back in right before my concluding 10, 15 minutes. I'll say I'm going to conclude here in a minute, but before I do that, I want to answer any questions. So we'll do answers, and then when all of the Q&A is done, okay. Now the most important thing, and then jump into the conclusion. At that point, they've become more engaged again, and you've got their attention. Man, people love to do that. They want to do Q&A at the end. They expect it, or they want you to do an intro of yourself. They don't care who you are. They don't care who you are. Tell them what you're going to teach them. Don't tell them how great you are at it. I hate that stuff.
They don't care. Well, I'm a corporate trainer in my real life, but I train people on hardware for cabinet and furniture making. So this could go a lot of different ways, but let's stick to presenting and training, because I think a lot of folks in the last year or two have gotten used to doing things through webinars or through Zoom meetings, and I agree with you. I take the questions when they come up. Sometimes the answer to the questions, we're going to cover that in about 3 slides. Sometimes the answer is, that is a really unique situation. How about you and I talk about this when the presentation's over? Yeah. But what you don't want to have is people that don't get a basic core concept that they need to understand for that 3rd slide away. So I agree. Take the questions when you come.
I did in my last presentation. I told them, because I was expecting to have questions interspersed. And so I told them, look, my background is in working with high school kids. And so you know, if I'm not being constantly interrupted, I start to talk longer. Yeah. And so if you want to get out on time, you better interrupt me with some questions.
Very good. So the other one, I guess I'll say, I've become more and more sensitive to this, is as it applies to a video that maybe you're recording a webinar that you want somebody after the fact to be able to watch, somebody who couldn't attend it, or a new hire that comes on the week after you do the webinar, or even YouTube, is I don't like to record a presentation to an audience if the plan is for people to watch it after the fact. I will record a very special direct-to-camera presentation for that audience. It's harder to keep people engaged when you're interacting with other people that maybe they can't hear well or they can't see. And as it applies to YouTube, how many channels do you watch where the person speaking is addressing a large mass audience? Or they'll say, hey, YouTube, welcome back. Well, YouTube's not watching. Scott's watching.
Yeah.
Seth is watching. You're watching. And so, presenting to an individual, in this case, the individual happens to be a camera on the back of an iPhone, but I'm talking to you, and that it's unique to you. So I try not to. Sometimes I still do, say, hey, you guys out there, blah, 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 because you're not you guys, you're you. And sometimes some of you are female as well. So, that's something that I think people get wrong often, is they think about, okay, there's this large audience, I'm addressing the audience. You're addressing an audience of one that just happens to be multiple audiences of one. So anyway, it kind of rubs me the wrong way, where I will host someone to do a webinar or something, and they'll be speaking. And in fact, they'll put on a persona and they'll project in a completely different way. And it's like, dude, bring it down. We're just having a conversation here. Yeah. But that's hard. That's hard to do. You see that red light and you're not used to it, and you kind of go into that mode.
Yeah. Or the other one that has made me leave live webinars and also close out pre-recorded webinars is when they spend the first 8 minutes of the scheduled webinar time with the, okay, where's everyone from? We're going to get started here in just a minute and blah, blah, blah. Like, first of all, start on time. And then that stuff, again, I understand the intent, but it's terrible. There's not a single person there that's super excited to tell you that they're in Boise, Idaho. They're there for the content you have promised to deliver them, and every minute you're not doing that, it's disappointing, boring, and the likelihood of me just noping on out of there increases.
Okay, so I do agree. It depends upon the meeting, right? Some meetings where you've got a small enough group that you can take that time to connect with people. I don't mind that.
Sure.
But what I do mind is we're going to wait for a few more minutes to make sure everybody gets logged in.
Right.
I mean, I've done that. You're not honoring the people that showed up on time.
Hundreds of people. Yeah. Like these are like company webinars where the company, Asana, is doing a webinar on best practices or whatever. And I don't understand, why don't they edit that part out of the video?
I do that too. I edit the recordings.
Yeah.
I edit all that stuff
out.
Hey,
if you missed it, we're going to send you the video. And then you go to the video, and the first 8 minutes is...
I was just editing something from a guy in our HR department. And it was an 1.5-hour video. And it's now an 1.5-hour webinar. It's now less than an hour-long video. But I took out every one of the... So, any questions up until this point? And there's just silence. Or maybe there's a question that applies to that. Hey, my stepdaughter lives mostly with my ex, but,
Right, yeah.
doesn't apply to everybody. Take it out.
That's right.
Makes it much easier to watch. All right, interesting. What did you think of the tobacco?
I was having a hard time keeping it lit.
I was having a hard time keeping it lit as well.
Yeah.
Again, a confession. The stuff has been sitting around for a year. I tried to rehydrate all of this. Some of it I overhydrated it. Some of it I underhydrated. And I think, when I was loading this up, I said to Boy, I said, this is going to burn like a pile of leaves.
Yeah, we've had Lane butter rum before. I like the tobacco.
Yeah.
But this particular, I think, moisture level was difficult to
It's on me. Sorry about that, Brian. But thank you, Brian, for sharing it. Answer the question, everybody. Comment below. If you do a video, remember to put a link to that video. And we'll get it out of the spam folder eventually and share it with everybody. And hey, if you see a link below, go click on it and show some love to some of these guys in the YouTube pipe community. We all appreciate each other. All right, let's wrap it up. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yes.
For day 17.
We will.
Make it a great day.
See ya.